Hi, this is Elisa with XYZ Wellness, and I'm here today with you to share just a short little tip on variations of Pigeon Pose. So if you're like me, maybe you love Pigeon Pose, but maybe not so much. Pigeon Pose is one of those poses that can be a love-hate kind of thing, and a lot of times it starts out where maybe you hate Pigeon Pose, but then the more you do it, maybe the more you see how much your body really does need it, and then it becomes a little bit of a love pose. And especially if you have any tightness in the hips, it can definitely be a very helpful pose. But the most important thing to remember is that it should never be about the knee. So when you come into pigeon, if it feels painful or uncomfortable in the knee, then we've got a couple different options that we'll go through, and perhaps trying one of those instead, and knowing that anytime you're in a class or flowing through your practice, you can come to one of the variations instead of traditional Pigeon Pose if that's appropriate for you. So we'll first find ourselves coming into Pigeon Pose, and there are a couple different ways to come into traditional pigeon, and depending upon the class that you're in, you might be in downward facing dog, and the instruction might be to step that knee forward. So for some people that may not be accessible, and if that's not comfortable and you're not a fan of that, then knowing that you could always lower down onto hands and knees. And this is, for a lot of people, a much more comfortable way to get into Pigeon Pose. So you can start on hands and knees just like in tabletop, and then bringing the right knee inside of the right wrist. And notice that I've shifted my left leg behind me already. And for a lot of people, this may be their pigeon with the heel directly under the hip. And that's completely fine. So a lot of times we think about moving the foot, and we'll explore that in just a moment. But if this feels good to you, knowing that you could stay right here. If you do want a little more, though, you could walk or invite that foot across the body so that the right foot is now in front of the left hip. One big key that I really did want to point out to you, in some classes or DVDs, you may hear about getting this front shin parallel to the front edge of your mat. And for most people, the good majority of people, that is not a safe position. That can put a lot of pressure and strain on the knee. So we don't want to do that, and as I stated before, this pose should never be something that you feel in the knee. So taking a gentler angle, perhaps, a more gentle angle, with that foot in front of the hip and a nice little angle here. And we'll explore this pigeon, finding a couple different variations even in this position. So we can start with our hands on our blocks or on the floor, and then maybe noticing where we are with this right hip. So we want to make sure that the shoulders and the hips are stacked. And if there's a lot of space between our right hip and the floor, we could place a blanket under that hip, or we could take our block and place it under the hip. Or we could, again, have that blanket or towel there, maybe bringing hands onto our blocks. And if we've got our hands on our blocks or on the floor, we might notice now that we're creating a little bit of a back bend, and we're getting some stretch in the front of the rear leg now. So traditionally we think about pigeon being an outer thigh and hip stretch, which it really is, but we can also get some sensation in that back leg in this upright variation of it. So if you've got a tight hip flexor on the back of that leg, or the front of that back leg, this might be an awesome place to stay. And maybe choosing to stay here. If you want to explore the stretch and the sensation on the right hip, that opening into that right hip, we could choose to maybe start to extend the body, and we'll do that by walking our hands slowly forward. So not worrying about rushing all the way down to the ground, but thinking about that length and integrity in the spine, and then perhaps bringing our block between the forearms, so that way we can keep the head in line with the spine, coming into this reclined version of pigeon. So again, checking in with the body. If there's any tightness or tension, or especially pain in that right knee, then we need to back out of this immediately, and we could come to one of our other options. But if this feels okay, we can stay here just as long as feels good, breathing into any sensations that we might be feeling into that right hip and thigh area. Maybe you're getting it into the low back a little bit. Just observing what's happening there. And then we'll slowly bring our hands under our shoulders, lifting the head, coming back upright, and then we can swing that left leg around to the front. So if that felt really good to you and you want to explore that on the other side, I invite you to come into Pigeon Pose just like we did on the right side, doing it on the left. Or you can try one of our other options for the other leg. So our first option will be a seated figure 4, and we'll take the left foot, the left ankle across the right thigh, bringing the hands behind the body, and we'll flex that top foot. You might explore bringing the hips closer to the front foot or a little bit further away, whatever feels good. But making sure that our left foot is flexed, the toes are pointing to the ceiling, and that'll protect that left knee. Remembering we never want to have any type of pain in our knee from any of our yoga poses. Lifting through the chest as we push the floor away from us. So this is our seated version of our pigeon alternative, our seated figure 4. And we could maybe stay here, or if you'd like, I can show you, and maybe you could explore the version on our back. So we could take our hands around one leg, lowering gracefully onto the floor. And just as we did a moment ago in our seat, we'll cross the left leg so that the ankle comes over the thigh, inviting that right thigh towards the front of the room, and maybe noticing as we shift that leg in the hip socket, how that creates some sensation. The top foot is flexed, drawing the toes in towards the shin. And if this is enough, you can stay right here. So always listening to your body and finding that place, that edge that feels good to you. Or if you need a little more sensation, you can start to lift that right thigh, and now flexing both feet, maybe holding on. You can take your hands, your left hand through that window of the legs, holding on. Just relaxing here, sending the breath into the left hip and thigh, maybe noticing this a little more into the low back. And always breathing into any sensations that you're feeling. And then as you're ready, you just release that leg down, uncross the legs, and we can turn to the side to help ourselves back up into our seat. So I do hope you enjoyed those different options for Pigeon Pose, and I hope that they make Pigeon a little more accessible to you. And please always just remember that on any given day, our bodies can be vastly different. So maybe what was appropriate yesterday may not be appropriate today, or maybe you're feeling more energetic or more flexible. So always listening to and honoring the body that you have today. And if you do like these videos, please make sure to like and subscribe, and also to push the little bell below so that way you'll get notifications every time that I post a video. And if you have any requests for videos or tips that I can offer you, please make sure to comment below. I always like to hear from my students, and I really, really appreciate you taking this time to watch this little tutorial on Pigeon Pose. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. Namaste.